Parents, if you are listening, what if I told you that your children in English class, secondary schools, both in junior and senior cycles, have the potential to be subject to reading and studying and watching graphic sex scenes, bondage, bestiality, torture, pedophilia, minors having sexual encounters with their stepmother, incest and rape? Would you be shocked, horrified? When I recently received this report, I personally was in disbelief. And my two guests are Wendy Drynan and Jackie O'Regan. Jackie O'Regan is a parent of 4 children, a committee member of Irish Parents Review English Curriculum. It's a blog site which reviews all the novels, plays and films currently on the prescribed list issued by National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, the NCCA. Wendy Drynan, an English teacher who has authored an independent research paper which examines the content and themes of the current prescribed English texts for junior cycle and leaving certificate. This report will examine 2 different questions. One is there a bias or balance evident in the type of text chosen by the NCCA for inclusion on the prescribed lists, and are the chosen texts appropriate for use in the classroom where the majority of students are still considered minors? Many people, like myself, up to only a few weeks ago when I heard about this, are totally oblivious to what is on that there could be a problem on the English curriculum. Can you go a little bit more in depth into give us a couple of examples of what many parents seem as inappropriate?
Yes, absolutely. So to the best of my knowledge, most of the novels, plays and films on both the junior and the senior cycle have been reviewed, and they're available for viewing on the blogspot, irishparents.blogspot.com. So if I was to open up the blog right now, just to give you some examples, so the first 10 books which would pop up, to give you an idea, would be The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, 1984 by George Orwell. Some of these might be familiar even to the parents. Some of them are classic. The Lauras by Sarah Taylor. This One Summer by Mariko Tamaki, and Out of the Shadows by Jason Wallace. So just to give you an example of what might actually you can see on the blogspot, one of the books that was reviewed was called The Lauras by Sarah Taylor. And this is, I'm reading this from the blog.
Yeah, I have a copy of the report here as well, and the blog spots here, and I was shocked looking at this. If you will, let's have a look at The Lauras. Check this out. This is even more shocking. This is The Lauras by Sarah Taylor on the senior cycle prescribed list, and I want to apologize in advance for the offensive nature of what I'm about to read. So my apologies indeed. I don't use this language at home in my house, and I certainly don't want it read in I have teenagers myself. I don't want it read in schools either. The Lauras by Sarah Taylor contains a barrage of offensive words and phrases such as crotch giblets in my pants, human being, would you let me suck your sucker and see off, etc., etc. 5 descriptive scenes of reference to masturbation, several scenes of physical violence, drug use, and scenes set in a strip clubs and drag clubs where the minor in the story lets an adult dress me like a doll. Every chapter is infused with reference to sexual acts or sexual thoughts, has no other obvious theme or redeeming merit for the classroom. On pages 56 to 60, there is a graphically described scene in which a minor is subjected to oral sex in a car by an older man and decides afterwards she rather enjoyed the experience. The scene is explicit, describes in detail the man's that's what it's mentioned, and what he expects the girl to do with it, what she does to it with her mouth and her tongue, and what it felt and tasted like, etc., etc. Now, do you want that read in your classroom? Do you want your teenage girls reading that? So this is a couple of the parents' reactions here. This is the verdict of of Elaine T. She's a concerned mother of teenagers in County Louth. This is unbelievable to think that this book has been selected, presumably by the NCCA. And then someone else here, Lisa and David M. from County Dublin. And they're parents to a 13-year-old, a 16-year-old, and an 18-year-old. They say not at all suitable for teenagers in terms of influence, immoral and crude. Here's another one, An Angry Mum, Jane T. in County Donegal. This book was chosen with a definite agenda in mind. English class is not the place to be pushing the sexual agenda. Where is the true literary merit in this book? It's all about dysfunction. I do not want my daughter or her friends subject to this disgusting read. And one more here from Damien C., County Dublin. She's a father who is a father and an English teacher. This book potentially normalizes an adult having oral sex with a minor. Just pause right there for a second. It should be reported. And the NCCA brought to account for choosing this book. So, does that say it all?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. It's currently on the junior cycle prescribed list. And so it's recommended by the NCCA for second and third years. So it describes horrific scenes of bondage and torture and bestiality. And I'm just going to give you direct quotes of what's actually happening. The huntress, an adult, kisses her victim, a minor, on the lips and exposes herself to him totally naked as she chains him to the table and falls asleep on a pallet beside him. Bloody, torn flesh and graphic gore and violence combined with sexual scenes make up a substantial part of this book. David, a minor, is even unwittingly lured into a sexual scenario involving his stepmother. In chapter 24, open quotation, a bedchamber contained a naked woman and a naked man, and the crooked man would bring children to them, and the man and woman would whisper things to them in the darkness of their chamber, telling them things that children should not know, dark tales of what adults did together in the depths of the night, end quotation. Another verdict from James and Teresa in County Cork, their parents of 4 teenage sons. Their verdict was disgusting, off the wall, totally inappropriate for junior or senior cycle. Where is the literature in that? ? So we can see, Brian, from that, that this book contains torture, bondage, murder, not so subtle hints of bestiality, incest, paedophilia, and really the comments, Brian says that it's unequivocally a big resounding no from the parents on that one.
Many parents will be unhappy at the crude, offensive, and immature manner in which mature themes are dealt with. It's shocking, and that's not all. There's more.
And this is the kind of material the NCCA wants to teach our kids in the English classroom now.
Yeah,
so it's incredible.
It boggles the mind. But hey, Wendy, are they all that bad? Are all the books that bad? Is there you're the one who've studied the statistics in this? How many books are leaning this way?
Okay, well, my report shows that an imbalance in the choice of texts has emerged. 52% of the senior cycle novels and 15% of the junior cycle novels, they contain a high level of what parents are calling inappropriate, explicit, graphic, gratuitous, or offensive sexual material. So we're talking about here like graphic sex scenes. At junior level then, Brian, 6 out of the 40 novels were found to have been previously banned in public libraries and schools in America and Britain due to their inappropriate, highly sexualized content, and 6 texts at senior level were also previously banned texts for the same reasons. We're all dealing with and looking at, examining what is appropriate to have on a school curriculum for minors. And some parents feel that it is what they're calling a form of emotional child abuse to even have these texts being brought into and taught in the classroom at all. It's unfair to subject vulnerable teenagers to this, forcing them to sit in a classroom to listen to some of this offensive, sexualized and distressing material.
Mm. But there are some good classic novels in there too. Like there's George Orwell's 1984. What do you think about that book, Wendy?
Okay, well, there are classics in there. There are like a number of Shakespeare texts, and the Brontes and Jane Austen texts like that have not listed any parental criticism whatsoever. They're all reviewed there on the blog site. However, 1984, it is indeed on the prescribed list. It is indeed considered a classic, but it is very decidedly an adult book, judging by parental reaction on the blog spot. Sometimes, we make the mistake and think that just because a book is considered a classic, that it's suitable for every age group to read. But let's examine 1984 now, and you'll see why parents are unhappy for their teenagers to be reading it. So I'm going to give you a few examples. I've taken this now from the blog site, okay? Blog site irishparents.blogspot.com. So I'll just read it out here. Winston, the protagonist, frustrated because he cannot go to bed with Julia, an attractive young girl, imagines, quote, he would flog her to death with a rubber truncheon. He would tie her naked to a stake and shoot her full of arrows. He would ravish her and slit her throat at the moment of climax, unquote. He thinks that he might, quote, smash her head in with a cobblestone. And later, when he finally gets to kiss her and tells her, quote, I hated you, I wanted to rape you, then kill you and smash your head in, unquote, she laughed delightedly. Julia's first sexual encounter took place when she was 16 years old, and the man involved was 60 years of age. Just think about that now. Winston is happy to hear that Julia, quote, has had sex hundreds, scores of times with party members, because anything to do with corruption always filled him with a wild hope, unquote. He fantasized about the pleasure of, quote, infecting the whole lot of them with syphilis or leprosy, unquote. Quote, the more men you've had, the more I love you. I hate purity. I hate goodness. I don't want any virtue to exist anywhere. I want everyone to be corrupt to the bones, unquote, says Winston. And later he officially admits he is willing to, quote, disseminate venereal diseases, to encourage prostitution, to murder and to corrupt children, unquote, in order to weaken the power of the party. Quote, eroticism and sexual intercourse within marriage were to be despised, unquote. Marriage itself is scorned and prostitutes are viewed as subhuman. Sexual scenes between Winston and his wife, Winston and a prostitute, and Winston and the girl are described sometimes in detail. A connection is made between violence and sex. Winston describes how he had once contemplated throwing his wife over the cliff. So verdict then by the blog spot says, this is an adult book, too graphic for school-going young people. The interesting backdrop to the story and the relevance of government involvement in our present lives does not justify exposing young, impressionable teens to sexual and physical violence, cruelty, gore, and vitriol. So that's taken from irishparents.blogspot.com.
Wow. I mean, you made an interesting point there earlier, Wendy, when you said that sometimes we make the mistake and think just because a book is considered a classic that it's suitable for every age group to read. Another example of that one would be The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. It's also considered by many to be a modern classic, but it contains rape and torture scenes. And again, look, from the blog spot, these are listed. This parental review, Kate from County Kerry says about this book, just because a book is getting a lot of publicity or is written by a famous author does not mean that it is good, helpful, or appropriate for our children to be studying in school. And this is definitely the case with The Handmaid's Tale. This is an adult book and not at all edifying or safe for our teenagers to be reading if we value their mental health at all.
Sometimes the movie she showed would be an old porno film from the 70s or 80s. Women kneeling, sucking guns, women tied up or chained with dog collars around their necks, women hanging from trees or upside down, naked with their legs held apart, women being raped, beaten up, killed. Once we had to watch a woman being slowly cut into pieces, her fingers and breasts snipped off with the garden shears, her stomach slit open, and her intestines pulled out. That's from the book. Here's another quote. Sex with the commander while she lays on the lap of the commander's wife. Quote, my red skirt is hitched up to my waist, though no higher. Below it, commander is what he is is the lower part of my body, end quote. You know, what about there's films on the curriculum as well. Wendy, what are parents saying about them? Are there any complaints about the movies? I don't know.
Unfortunately, lots, and with some good reason. As a teacher last year, I had to choose which movie to show my junior certs, and it was such a disappointing selection because of all the objectionable content in the majority of the movies on the prescribed list. And in the end, there were really only two which I felt I could choose from for the juniors, because 40% of the junior level prescribed films contain inappropriate sexual scenes or nudity, and 3 of the films contain a high use of crude sexual language.
Can you summarize your findings for us, please, in the survey?
Yeah, there were only 8 questions, so I can actually I can put the survey up on the screen here, the results. So so the first question was, would you be happy for your child to study a book containing explicit graphic scenes of a sexual nature in English class? And 98% of the parents said no. 2, are you aware that graphic sex scenes, rape scenes, oral sex scenes, masturbation, sexual violence, bondage, incest, torture, bestiality, and pedophilia are all represented in the present texts selected by the NCCA?
So, Wendy, your report contains a quote from the new curriculum guidelines for senior cycle, which states, quote, developing students' interests in literature remains central to Leaving Cert English, end quote, and that they become confident, thoughtful, and discriminating adults and citizens, end quote. So clearly the present prescribed list of novels, plays, and films, as outlined by the NCCA, cannot in good conscience claim to achieve these aims at all, but rather the opposite. And you end your report with the paragraph. I'm just going to read it out here. It says, the adolescents of this country deserve the challenge of quality modern literature which is crafted well, with resonance and beauty, featuring themes which will inspire them to be better people. They deserve to be elevated and encouraged rather than debased and put down. They need to imbibe hope rather than darkness in the classroom. No one desires that the next generation coming up will leave school with no experience of the beauty, depth, and challenge of true literature. The curriculum our teachers are presently drawing from has the harmful potential of exposing our students to the knowledge of how to torture and kill a young child, plan a suicide attempt, have sex with their mother, desecrate a corpse, and perform oral sex. They don't deserve this demeaning form of emotional abuse. That's what it is, emotional abuse. And it cannot be allowed in our classrooms. It is interesting to note that the NCCA's child safeguarding statement claims to be, quote, fully committed to safeguarding the well-being of children and young people with whom the council works, end quote, and, quote, committed to the right of every child and young person, that's every child and young person, to be kept safe and protected from harm, end quote. This report has clearly shown that our present English curriculum content is not in line with this claim. Our children and youth deserve to be introduced to quality classics, old and modern, whose timeless themes of love, family, friendship, self-sacrifice for the greater good, moral dilemmas, etc., are always universal and important in a young person's vision. For the sake of our nation's well-being, safety, and educational progress, we need to remove the offending books from our national curriculum and restore true literature to our nation's classrooms. So, very well written there, Wendy, I have to say. So, Jackie, what action can parents now take to ensure that these changes will take place?
Yeah, they can certainly contact the Minister for Education, Norma Foley. Her contact details are actually on the blog site. Contact your local TDs and councillors, your local school principal. Really, they're the ones that can make a change on the ground. And really, the impression we got from doing the reviews, and that was that a lot of the principals and teachers don't really know the content of the books. So the louder parents protest and the more awareness, then the more we'll be listened to. It's up to us to protect our children. Nobody else is going to do that for us. So if we take the time to go to the NCCA website, which is ncca.ie, give suggestions, because it's one thing to present a problem, but actually if we can give suggestions, a good alternative, so we're not just complaining, but we're actually giving the solution. Give suggestions for good alternative books, plays and films, and you can see on the irishparents.blogspot.com the kind of ideas that other parents have come up with if you can't think of them yourself. But the more proactive we are and not just complaining but giving solutions and alternatives, I think that would be a good thing.
Absolutely. And another good idea would be as well to even as you watch this, maybe you can post this on and pass this on to other people, particularly as you said there, principals of schools and teachers as well. From the ground up, this needs to happen. Wendy, thank you so much for doing this. It's certainly been enlightening for me reading this, and shocking, and I'm sure shocking for many of you listening or watching this. It shocks us to the core, what is going on, and if we don't do anything about it, it's going to continue. And Jackie, thank you again, and thank you all to the Irish Parents .blogspot and Irish Parents Review the English Curriculum. Thank you for you guys for taking the time out and doing it. And so it goes to you guys now out there. Take the time and get active about this as well. In the words of Edmund Burke, the 16th century Irish statesman, quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing," end quote. And he also said, "Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little," end quote. So parents, ring your principal, contact Norma Foley, contact your local counsellor, go on the NCCA website and suggest more suitable books and state your concerns. So that's it. Thank you very much, Wendy. Thank you very much, Jackie. Again.
Thanks for having us.
All right. God bless you all. Take care.